Okay, so we are a few weeks into these shorts now, and I am starting to get the questions thick and fast. So, thank you so much for sending them in. And for those of you who haven't sent me a question yet, but are enjoying these or finding them helpful, please do send your questions in. So, I've got a question here, which is: can you talk about changing how people perceive you in the workplace? Okay, so I'm conscious this is a short, and so we're keeping this inside 10 minutes. This is a fairly meaty topic, but there's always a few ways that we can think about this that can kickstart that process. So I often like to break down these things into thinking or cognitive stuff, feeling or emotional stuff, and then doing. So action and experience based things. So, if we were to look at those areas, the thinking piece, there's a few different things that you can do here. The one is just understanding how identity is cultivated. So, if you want to change the way you're perceived, there's a concept in the academic literature which is called social identity. And what this is we develop our senses of self based on feedback that we receive from the world around us. Yes, we also have some of our own innate senses of identity, and identity is comprised of many different aspects. But one very important one, especially in environments like the workplace, is that feedback that we get from others. So, for example, if everybody treats you like a leader with great ideas, then you start to feel like one. If everybody dismisses you and minimizes you, then you don't feel like one, even if you are doing all the same actions as the person who is treated as a leader. And of course, this is where some of those systemic biases come in. And it's so important to understand how these work so that we don't take it upon ourselves or take all the responsibility on ourselves if we are feeling less than in these environments. So, understanding the social identity component can be really useful here as we start to think about how we want to then change the way that we're perceived inside an organization or inside our place of work. And so, knowing that that exists, how can we influence that social identity? So, this is where I think we get into the actions and behaviors piece. And so, based on our research, I interviewed a lot of individuals who had managed to change their identity in the workplace. And one example stood out to me, which was somebody who really had a very clear vision of that next stage that she wanted to get to inside her department. She talked about this with her line manager, and he helped formulate a plan to enable her to do that. Part of that involved a secondment. And what she said to me in her interview with me was that she hadn't realized it at the time, but this secondment enabled her to shed her current identity. It enabled her to physically become unmeshed from the work that she was typically associated with. She was able to shake off the typical responses and ways that she would have behaved in that current role. And then, having gone and got that experience, she was able to come back in with a fresh start and be in a much better position to take on that next level role and have a renewed sense of identity around her. So it actually took her leaving the organization or leaving that department to be able to make that change. Now, some of us are not going to be able to do such extreme behaviors, but I think the thing to take away here is that if you want new identities and new ways of being perceived, you will need to engage in new actions and new behaviors. So you may well take on different kinds of projects which associate you with different things. That would be an example. Or you may well behave differently. Now, if you're going to do the behave differently piece, then what I really encourage my clients to do, or people who are part of programs that I'm involved with, is use your coaching and leadership development card. So if you've decided that as part of your shifted identity, you want to act in a slightly different way, make sure that you let your team members and people who are close to you and who are going to be interacting with you, make sure that they know that this is what you're going to do. Because otherwise, what happens is you come out of your coaching or your development or your intention setting supercharged, knowing that this is what you want to do, but no one else really gets it. Nobody else has been thinking about that stuff. And so you're really making people work very hard if you make them do all of the guesswork. And it comes back to that simple fact that most people are more consumed with their own worlds and their own inner dialogues than they are trying to figure out if somebody's shifted their identity in the workplace. So you're much better off using the coaching or training or development passport and saying, okay, this is something I'm working on now, and I would love your feedback and support on how it's going. And that way, you've actually been able to enlist them in your process, and your efforts will not be falling on deaf ears, right? So we've got a few different things to think about here. We've got understanding your thoughts around identity, yeah, and that social identity piece, and starting to shift those when you're aware that some of that is due to other people and the way they respond to you. And you don't need to internalize all of that or assume it's your own responsibility. And you can start to take charge for your identity in the workplace through other activities. That's number one. Number two is more about behavioral and action taking stuff. So finding ways for people to associate you with different things. It might be a secondment or some kind of project that almost takes you out of your usual responsibilities, if that's possible. But if not, then demonstrating that you have a hand in new styles of work or new types of thinking or knowledge, and that you are able to share those. That is another really powerful way. What I would add here, which is something that I work on a lot with clients, is one of the easiest ways to start changing the way that you're perceived inside your workplace is to start changing it outside the workplace. And we have the beautiful platforms now that are social media, and you can take small systematic actions on a regular basis, which there is evidence to show over time can accumulate to cultivate new professional identities. And so what this does is it takes the pressure off the way you're being currently perceived inside your current workplace, and it moves it to a fresher space where you get to control the dialogue and the narrative a little bit more. Over time, this adds up and snowballs, and you will start to be seen for the things that you are maybe talking about or engaging with online as well. And the two can work really well together. I remember in a previous life as an employee, as someone that did every now and then share blog posts and different articles on LinkedIn, I was known then inside the organization as somebody that did that. And as a result of that, when I was on one of my maternity leaves, I was approached to do a specific 4-part series on behalf of my organization. And it was cool because I had kit days, keeping in touch days to use where I would be paid to do this. And it was really cool. And clearly, it was also the kind of early signs that I would be in some form of content creation in my next phases. But it was really cool that I had been doing that in a small but clearly sort of notable way the whole time that I had been working there. And at the right moment, I was then the person that seemed like the right go to put this 4-part written series together, which they were then able to share. So think about how you might cultivate your own voice in that way. And identity change can be really rapid when you make those dramatic moves, like going off on a secondment and then returning afterwards. Or they can be a really slow and steady build up over time, chiseling away and developing through almost an iterative approach, new things that you're kind of associated with and known for. I hope you'll give some of those a try. Let me know how they land for you. And especially the idea of social identity. I think it's something that it can be really useful to have that insight about how we are, how we create our identities at work, and how much of that can be down to the way that people have responded to us in the past, and that then becomes almost reinforcing. And so knowing that if we want to change some of those perceptions, we probably need to start with that realization and that acknowledgement of how much that loop can influence us, our social identities. And we're going to need to almost proactively take charge of that in a way that allows us to make those shifts in the way that we are perceived in the workplace. I hope you found that helpful. Let me know, and I look forward to connecting with you next time. Bye bye.